Yes. So, good morning everyone. This is Vidya Srinivasan and I'll be taking the subject Law of Thoughts, specifically with relating to meaning and nature of thoughts, and we'll be discussing the essential elements of thoughts and the differences between thought and crime and thought and breach of contract. So, before we begin with the subject, I would like to clarify one thing, that when we are studying law of thoughts, we have to be studying in that manner as thoughts, because it simply clarifies that this is with relating to the acts in plural form. So, when we state where does thought word, where does it derive its meaning from? So, I would like to state that it is derived with the meaning from the Latin word, which is tortum, which is basically the meaning is to twist. Okay, so when we state that, when we state the meaning of thought, it is basically nothing but the acts or omissions committed by the defendant perspective. The aggrieved party is the plaintiff, and for that the redressal is in the form of unliquidated damages. And what we would like to state more is this tort concept, it is different from your breach of contract and breach of trust. So how come we state that it is different from breach of contract and breach of trust? Is in contract, it is basically an agreement between two parties made in a written form, and the redressal will be in the form of liquidated damages, which is basically fixed between the parties, and it is stated in the agreement perspective. Whereas if you state torts, it is basically an act of omission done by the defendant towards the plaintiff, and the redressal will be in the form of unliquidated damages, which is basically not measured and it is fixed by the court of law. So this is how you differentiate your breach of contract and breach of trust. And in the case of your trust, it is basically nothing but the parties will not be known each other through personally, but the relation is created through the fiduciary nature. That is, examples are parent and child, doctor and patient, teacher and student. These are the similarities that we find in the case of your trust and tort, but the damages that are basically granted to the parties, that is the difference. In the case of your breach of trust, we would rather state that the damages provided will be in the form of liquidated damages, whereas in the case of your tort, we would state that it is basically the damages provided are unliquidated one. So these are the main points with relating to your tort, wherein which we can derive from the definitions in the Limitation Act of 1963 and by the jurists Salmon and Winfield. So this is your meaning of torts, and if we state the nature and essentials of torts, we would state the three important points, which is basically an act of omission done by the defendant perspective, and that act of omission should be only with the case of your infringement of legal rights. So we would state that there should be no infringement of your social or economic rights, but legal rights will be considered, and that act and omission should lead to your recovery of unliquidated damages. So this is your nature and essentials of torts. And just come back to the main basic perspective, that is, there are differences between your tort and breach of contract, wherein which, as we already stated in the first part, that is, the contract is basically an agreement wherein which the damages which are provided to the parties are in liquidated form, whereas in tort it is unliquidated damages. And why we are stating it? Because tort is uncodified law, because we do not have any law as in existence. Now let us come back to the differences between your tort and crime, wherein which we can state that the main difference is for your crime there is an intention required, whereas in tort we would commit the act wherein which no intention would generally be involved. So that is a main difference. And one more thing we would like to remember is that tort has its genesis from English common law. So that is a main point that we would like to state with reference to your tort.